let's get started. So thanks very much everyone for joining. Um, I don't know whether anyone had a chance to see the agenda. I only added it late on Friday, I think. But let me just share my screen. So what I wanted to do was give an update on the work that we've been doing kind of in the policy and influencing space over the past since we last kind of met, which I think was about 3 months ago, and come up with talk about some of the priorities for the next kind of quarter. And then it'd be interesting just to get some thoughts on a couple of different topics, and which kind of linked, but which are around the child poverty task force and just kind of topic of kind of child poverty, and then also if there are any views and on the kind of changes to disability benefit, which is another big topic that is kind of that we're kind of a lot of the organizations that we're working with are talking about, and I want to make sure we can kind of think about what Home Start's position is in there, and if we have one, and if we're able to talk about that. So I thought just to recap from where we were from the last meeting, and we had the kind of plans for this year. The first was to put the quarterly policy forums in the diary, carry on engaging with kind of coalitions and working groups, which we've been doing. We're on the first 1001 days movement. We attend End Child Poverty Coalition meetings for both the UK and for Scotland. We are part of the Health Policy Influencing Group, which is the kind of official NHS kind of the group that the NHS uses as kind of the voice of the children's and early years sector. That's a large group that we're part of there, but we kind of attend that and can feed back onto any kind of consultations and things that they're doing. And we also attend a kind of briefing that National Children's Bureau also organise, which is called the Cross-Sector Manifesto Influencing Group, which was set up before the election, which is why it's got the word manifesto in. But it's just an information sharing group around kind of the children's sector as a whole. But obviously, we're interested there from an early years setting. They're the main ones. There are a few more in Scotland as well, and I'm sure that we're looking at how we can develop that work in Northern Ireland too. Continue to provide evidence and discuss Home Start with DfE. We've been talking to the Department for Education kind of fairly regularly and officials there, and Department for Health around kind of their ongoing developing plans. We plan to attend the Labour Party conference. I've applied for my pass and booked my hotels, so we're going to then be looking at if there is any way we can engage with any partners who are running events, and how if there's any opportunity for us to engage there. We had a plan for this year as a potential report or launch event. I think it's really unlikely now that Home Start UK will develop a kind of its own report, an external report, and do an event. There is a possibility of a kind of parliamentary event in coalition with another organisation, with a funder. That's all still up in the air. And we're also working with a corporate partner who they do research and kind of public affairs work, and we've just been talking to them about doing a piece of work around family hubs and early years. So that's going to have, I think, probably, although there'll be lessons for the whole UK, it'll probably be mainly focused on England, but it'll be quite interesting to see what the lessons have been on family hubs for those Home Starts who have been working with their family hubs, especially if that gets rolled out more widely over after this week. So, and we want to do more family voice, and there are a few different ways that we're looking at that, and I can talk about that in a little bit as well. So we set out a mission and objectives for this. This piece of work sits in our building a movement kind of strand of our strategic plan, and so in making Home Start's voice and trying to create systems change. The kind of activity since March. There was an early years summit that Vivian is currently acting CEO after Peter has left, and before we get new chief exec. She's acting CEO, I'm sure everybody knows Vivian. We attended an early years summit with the National Children's Bureau that brought together reps from children's charities, early years providers, Department for Health, Department for Education, to try and come up with a new vision for early years and family support, and also to kind of put some pressure on ahead of spending review, which will be on Wednesday. We hosted with Home Start Nuri, the Northern Ireland Children's Commissioner. He visited Home Start Nuri and Mourne, and also met with a couple of other Home Start leaders from across Northern Ireland, and that was a really helpful meeting. He got to meet families, volunteers, and then also met with those managers, and they kind of gave him a picture of early years of Home Start's work across the country. It's a really good kind of model for that meeting. It worked really well. I mean, if it would be great to be able to do that again with children's commissioners in Wales and in Scotland. We have to investigate how we do that, and England as well. But I think that we can make most progress with Wales and Scotland if they haven't visited Home Starts already. We have joined the education subgroup for the Essentials Guarantee campaign, and that's a campaign organised by Joseph Rowntree Foundation and Trussell. I think they've changed the name from the Trussell Trust, but the people who do food banks. They have got this Essentials Guarantee campaign, and it's been running for a while, and we've been signed up to, and that's about increasing the levels of universal credit to cover a kind of minimum level so that people can afford the kind of essentials. Because the government have got a focus on what they're calling opportunity, which is basically about early years kind of education, and also about health, they've set up subgroups for that, one on education and one on health. And they asked us to join the education one. And it's quite interesting being part of that group, because most of the others, there's a school teachers union in there. There's a couple of other schools-based charities. So the focus is naturally for them on school-age children. And so we're trying to get them to think about education, not just when you have turned up for school, but that kind of period before school and how you get children ready for that, and the impact that then poverty has on that bit as well. So that's how we're kind of focusing our energies within that group. We took part in a roundtable with University of Oxford. Again, that was on kind of child poverty and the impact on poverty on families. And so we're really there and we're talking about how there were people there who were really good at talking about actually how do you change different benefits, universal credit, different elements of the kind of social security system to support families. We were there able to really talk about the impact on families, but also on the kind of support that you can kind of put around families, and that needs to that can build their kind of capacity. We attended, in fact, I'd say we, Eliza, who's on the call, wave, attended a meeting with the First Minister's policy unit around, which was kind of pulled together by End Child Poverty Scotland, and Eliza was able to represent the Home Starts across Scotland at that meeting. It's great to be included in that. And we had a similar roundtable for the British Gas Energy Trust roundtable, which again, a lot of these things are around kind of poverty and how we improve, how that is about how the energy sector can make things easier for families. I mean, outside of just lowering energy bills, obviously, but making kind of bills easier to understand, making it harder for families to kind of get into the debt around kind of energy and things like that. And we've also begun outreach with MPs. We've got I've got a few meetings with MPs coming up over the next few weeks. The government have things called mission champions, which are kind of backbench MPs who can go around promoting the different missions they have. So we're meeting with two of those, the MP for Kettering and the MP for Hydeburn. And then there's also a meeting in Manchester with MP. Shelley might be able to talk about that, or might not want to. Who's hoping to visit at some point, and I think I'm going the MP for Corby has arranged for families that he met to visit Parliament later on this month, and has asked someone from Homes.uk to go to kind of tell him about the kind of national work as well. So that's really exciting. It feels like there's lots of people are kind of wanting to hear about early years work and organisations that work in it. It's one of the things that I've really noticed is that there is a big focus on early years work at a kind of national level and how we support families, how we support children, and people are kind of a bit of a kind of scramble around to kind of go, well, who works in this space? And people keep coming back to Homestart, which is really fantastic. And we're able to be engaging with anyone who wants to kind of learn more about us and how we can kind of help support that work and what we've been doing for 50 years. And the opportunities for the future. So that's where we've been doing a lot of work over the past kind of last 3 months. And then upcoming priorities. As I said, spending review is on Wednesday. It'll be interesting to see what gets announced there. We'll be looking to kind of, hopefully kind of be able to kind of react to that kind of publicly and hopefully welcome it with open arms. But we've also prepared for if we have to say how disappointed we are. I mean, it's really hard to say what what anyone expects. So I don't know if anyone was on the call. There's the Parent Infant Foundation are currently hosting a webinar that just finished a few minutes ago, because it's Infant Mental Health Awareness Week, and they had an MP who runs their all-party parliamentary group, and she made reference to spending it. She sounded quite optimistic that there would be, increased spending on early years. As we say, it's part of the getting 75% of children a good level of development in their foundation year is a really key milestone. And so it would seem really odd if there is no support for that. But then, we've spoken to people in Department for Education who said, don't get your hopes up for loads and loads of money. Who knows? But we will have to see. It will be really nice if I think that it will be a surprise if there is not an expansion of family hubs, to be honest, because they seem to think that's a good model, but I don't know. We'll obviously be preparing for the family poverty strategy, which was expected in June. Some of you may have kind of engaged with the Child Poverty Task Force. That was announced. You probably saw the other week that won't now report until the autumn, which some people have said actually that's fine. We said actually it's a bit disappointing that it's got kind of put back. Others said actually as long as you come out with something good in the autumn, then that will be fine, as long as that's what happens. And we've been working with, and I can share, the End Child Poverty kind of coalition have created 8 kind of tests for what it would need to be a kind of seen as a credible strategy for reducing child poverty. And the 2 red lines are really making a kind of legal requirement to cut poverty, and to reform the make reforms to the benefit system and removing the 2-child limit and the benefits cap. If it doesn't do that, then I don't think it'll be seen as credible. And the kind of feeling is they need to do that close to a budget, but who knows? I think that will be a big kind of marker. I think that strategy, then obviously we'll be preparing for the conference, as I say, and we're looking to develop work with Save the Children. And we've been having kind of conversations with Save the Children for a while in Scotland for feels like a long time, at least over a year now, about how we can work kind of more closely together. And there's a bid in to kind of do some work around kind of participation and getting kind of family voice and into their kind of policy work and amplifying kind of the kind of experiences of families. And there's a proposal going with a funder at the moment, but we're also talking to them about kind of getting some support to do kind of some data and impact work, which would be great, but also to kind of in England to do that kind of participation work as well. And that would really kind of help us with that priority I talked about earlier around kind of increasing that kind of capacity to do kind of get family voice into our policy and practice work, to be honest, because they've done Save the Children have done a lot of that kind of work themselves. Really interestingly, I think Save the Children strategy is not really do any kind of delivery work now in England, but to kind of focus their work on advocacy and policy change. But obviously, they still need to kind of work with organisations that are making that change and working with families on the ground. So we're quite a good fit for working in partnership with them. So I'm going to let me just stop sharing. So that's the kind of update from where we are and our priorities. And it'd just be interesting to hear from anyone else whether there's anything that you want that you've kind of done or kind of seen either like locally or kind of can reflect on what we've done, if there's any feedback on that. So feel free to share. I mean, I know obviously lots of you are engaging locally, whether that's through Shelley, I know you engaged. There's a lot that's in Greater Manchester about kind of both through family hubs and other kind of partnerships. If there are things that you've seen kind of locally that would be worth kind of reflecting on.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. So just on the point about Maternal Mental Health Week and the Parent Infant Foundation, you may have seen that they've kind of launched a draft letter for people to send to local MPs, just kind of lobbying really for a mandate really from the government, but also just thinking about equity in terms of investment. And I just wonder whether Home Start UK could potentially put that out on the intranet for ski. I know we've shared it with our staff team and with our local partners, but whether that could go out on the intranet.
It definitely can. And I've got a feeling I've put something about information, but I can flag those letters up and make it really clear that they're there.
Cool. Yeah. And then I think in terms of the Family Hub programme and potential longevity and scaling up of that, I think from Home Start's perspective, it's just continuing to be really clear that the Family Hubs programme is not just a buildings-based provision, and that actually a huge part of that programme is around peer support, cross-sector delivery, and outreach in families' homes, which I know locally, even though it's kind of really explicit in the guidance, with commissioners even, still this cultural pull to, okay, so what are you doing to get families into the hubs? So there's a real kind of challenge locally, and I'm sure that's the case across the board. So it's around understanding of the programme and how it's delivered effectively. So it's not just buildings based. So I think there's messaging around that.
That's really helpful.
Yeah. And so then in terms of the visit at the end of this month, then that's on the 27th of June. So that's with a local Manchester MP, Lucy Powell, and Andrea Ledson. And then I think yourself and Sarah are coming along to that. And Andrea's just really interested in learning more about generally what we're doing, but with a Dad Matters focus. So we've got colleagues from City Council and a couple of parents attending as well. So it should be good.
Yeah, no, fantastic. I mean, the thing that I didn't mention in any of that presentation, but I mean, it's probably one of the biggest pieces of work for this year is around Dad Matters. I don't know if anyone here, obviously, Shelley, you do. I don't know if anyone else delivers Dad Matters at all or has heard of it. But that, as you know, that was kind of developed from Home Start. The host originally, that's Kieran is that kind of on common with us for 6 months and kind of embedding that within Home Start UK to kind of roll out across the network and developing that. But which is the kind of, but there, we've got kind of hopes that we could be kind of bigger and we could help incubate that a lot quicker. But obviously, all of this is dependent on funding. But but that's a big piece of work this year, and I think the Dad Matters program has been so successful. I think in terms of the way it's engaged dads, and Kieran is absolutely a fantastic kind of advocate for that piece of work, and it's created such a fantastic brand, really, and a project. Is there anyone else who's got anything else to add? I mean,
I put something in the chat, Matt.
Yes.
Can I just add to it?
Yeah.
Two things. Since you just finished with the family hubs, it would be good if they roll it out. I'm not sure how your optimism around early years funding links to what's just come out, which is a pro bono economics report doing a review of funding for the early years over the recent years, and actually presenting quite a dismal picture.
Really?
In that it's got so far to catch up
Yeah.
in terms of even being where it was 10 years ago, let alone where it is with the current financial needs of families,
Yeah.
that I just personally feel that there's a lot of words going around, but actually until we have something that really demonstrates there's a significant increase in, and I would say the earliest years, not the early years, because still within government, early years is seen as 3+.
Yeah.
And in many departments. So those are just two queries I have from that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the optimism from anyone is probably relative. Like, I don't think
You're on drugs.
Possibly, yeah. I don't think there's any. I mean, I don't think there's any kind of feeling that there's going to be the level of investment that kind of Sure Start had that made it successful. I mean, there are loads of the reports that have kind of come out recently talking about the benefits of Sure Start, and it's interesting talking to the people who kind of did that work. Because I think there are bits in there that really point to the fact that there was the earliest Sure Starts had a big impact, and the big part of that was being the outreach work. A lot that was delivered by Home Starts at the time, right? But actually, the big impact, you see them say, "Oh yeah, it's interesting. You've pulled that out." Like, so you can pull. There's lots of things that people are putting out about why this worked. At the end of the day, I think it's just the money. That was what made the difference in those for Sure Start in that early. It was a real significant investment. The people who did that research have got a really interesting chart about showing the levels of spending that go on to the earliest years and early years. It's kind of gone down since 2010, and the level of money that's spent on childcare and early childcare and nursery places, which has kind of gone up, and it's kind of like basically the same amount of money, but that's where it's being invested. And it's quite interesting that that's where kind of the political choices has been. I'm not saying that it's not important to make childcare available, but it's clearly been spent there. In terms of what was your second point for apart from other than spending?
It was around the family hubs and whether it's going to come out in the same way, because currently the expectation is that those local authorities that didn't get the funding because they didn't bid are expected to still be delivering, and we get told that there is no money that we're going to deliver, and you just
and there are some homes there are some areas that are delivering family hubs without family hubs money, aren't there? I mean, I'm not sure how kind of, and some I've heard from people who said that works quite well for them. I don't know. I mean, obviously there is. That was the second thing, is about the focus on earliest years rather than just early years, and the focus on 3. And I think it's really interesting because the target for good levels of development being at 75% by 28 essentially forces you. It's really, everyone is aware that this basically forces you to, if that's what you're measuring, focus on children who are now kind of about 2 and 3, because they'll be your 4 and 5-year-olds in 28. And really, there is a risk that you will only focus on people who are likely to meet your 75% target. So there is a risk that you would just ignore people or not focus enough on children who aren't likely to meet that risk. That, I think everyone is aware that there is that risk. And it's interesting that when you speak to people, they say, well, we're aware of it. We want to build systems, and don't ignore that, don't ignore that. But there is a risk that if that's what you're measuring, that is what you'll kind of put your investment in. It'll be interesting to see whether that actually happens, or whether they do kind of engage with the bits that make we know the biggest difference in those first kind of couple of years as well.
Thank you.
I do think that there's an opportunity with the kind of conversations we've had that if there is if there is a rollout of Family Hub, or a real kind of focus on how we deliver the kind of, especially the kind of support for children in that school readiness space and kind of home learning environment, for us to be able to help shape that what that looks like. I think there is an opportunity for us to do that, but obviously, you know, what the result of that, I don't know. There'll be lots of people shaping it. So yeah, but hopefully our kind of goal is to kind of advocate for Home Starts and build where it's. I mean, I think almost impossible to see a situation where Home Start UK got a government central grant like it did back in the day. I just do not think that will happen. But I think it's about kind of helping to shape the local environment and the kind of frameworks that Family Hub operates that allows Home Starts then to be able to kind of put themselves in the frame to help deliver that work and getting that funding to be able to deliver that work. And I'm fully aware, Eliza, that this has been entirely England centered, and Nikki, I see you're here as well, an entirely England centered kind of last 20 minutes. But yeah, I don't know whether Eliza and Nikki have any kind of views on how this kind of might play out in Scotland, or whether it's relevant at all in Scotland.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was sort of sitting here, Matt, thinking the policy forum is a really good one to highlight some of these issues, but where is there maybe like conversations which are relevant to nation-specific conversations which could be happening, so that you're making the best use of everyone's time?
I agree.
Because it's quite a different setup, and there's potential to share some learning about, but I mean, I guess, you know, the Scotland approach to early years is just quite different. That would be my take. I don't know if Nikki's got a different perspective.
Absolutely. I think I totally agree with Eliza. I mean, I think it's just about, you know, being respectful of each other and respectful of everybody's time. There's no point in, you know, sitting listening to stuff that's not relevant to us. But, you know, it's a good starting point. But I think, you know, even if we're having more regular short blasts, so yeah.
No, I completely agree. And so I think we'll pick that up. So I don't know. I mean, Nikki, you will know this already, just so everyone knows. So Eliza has just taken up. Eliza, what's the?
I don't really know.
What's the grand title?
You know what the title is, if I'm honest, but I've been given one day a week of like leading the Scottish network of Home Starts, and that's around you know, supporting the network, but also leading on sort of like or working with Matt on some of the like policy areas and having kind of a stronger footing here in Scotland. So, you know, Matt and I have got a meeting in a couple of weeks to start to like kind of pace some of that out and see what it could look like. But I think where it's really interesting is potentially thinking about, you know, if we're talking about the child poverty agenda, which obviously is a strong one, like where could actually, as a network, we start to think about what we're collecting, you know, and where is there some more robust data that we could be collecting, or how would we do that? What would influencing look like at like a kind of networked level? Because that sort of like action against child poverty is not nation specific, like how it's operationalized is, but actually the messaging from a Home Start perspective would be best as one, I think. So, you know, is there some like action that we could take as a network around that? I mean, I think that sort of stuff would be really interesting for this forum. That's just my perspective.
Yeah, I agree. Cool. Okay, so does anyone else have anything to add on that, or shall we kind of skip on to the second half of this? Or we probably can. So
I can see Prue's talking, but I don't know if she's talking to us, herself, or somebody else.
I'm talking to myself all the time. Just one powerful message to share. I have a memory of attending an event at Somerset House with Home Start UK ministers' families. And there was a minister standing there, slightly aloof, and a mum tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Are you one of these people that sorts out funding for Home Start?" Just like that. And he said, "Yes. Well, get your act together and make sure you do it, because it's a brilliant organisation. So we need lots of mums to be accosting, and dads to be accosting ministers or MPs as they go around and saying, well, get your act together." Perhaps we could train up some of our early years kids to be doing that as well.
Yeah, I know
it was just a light touch, but it was a very powerful memory.
Definitely, and I know that Home Starts in Scotland, there have been quite a few kind of visits over the past kind of 12 months of ministers in the Scottish government visiting Home Starts, which I think have all been kind of really kind of powerful visits. And when we had the event with the Children's Commissioner in Northern Ireland the other week, there is something about just having the opportunity to talk to families, both about their own experiences, but also the kind of work that Home Start does, that leaves a kind of really kind of a lasting impression on people. And so that's, I think, whenever we have the opportunity for that, to because we can all talk to people about what Home Start does, but it's when people have the chance to hear from families, that's the bit that will stick with them. And so yeah, any opportunities we have to do that, I think we take. The child poverty task force. So if people are happy, can we talk about I want to get some thoughts on child poverty task force, and then kind of and changes to disability benefit, and how we might engage with both those. It'd be just interesting to hear the thoughts of people in this room about both of those things. Let me go back to child poverty task force. So can people see this slide? Yep. So yep. Child poverty task force, anyone who was set up about September or something in 24, I think, after the election. They carried out a lot of there was written evidence to be submitted, roundtables. Sarah went to a roundtable in Edinburgh, in Glasgow. We helped Save the Children host a roundtable in Birmingham. They collected a whole load of evidence. They've gone away and are writing it up right now. It was meant to be out in spring. Then I heard someone, when it was going to be looking like June, I heard the phrase warm spring, which I had never heard before. And then now it's going to be autumn, I think. End Child Poverty Coalition, and which is kind of organised by Child Poverty Action Group, have set out these eight tests that they think it needs to meet. And then I think if people think it doesn't meet these tests, then they will kind of say it's not a credible strategy, and will be kind of encouraged to kind of join, sign up to kind of letters or whatever to say that it doesn't meet the kind of framework of being a kind of credible strategy. And I think there are two in there that they have highlighted as being essential red lines, but it needs to have legally binding targets, and it needs to have removing the 2-child limit and benefits cap. And if it doesn't do either of those, then it doesn't matter what the rest are. And I just wonder if anyone had kind of thoughts about either what we should do kind of nationally, if anything, how we should kind of engage in partnerships, what you see locally, and if actually this is relevant at a local level at all, whether it's got any kind of cut through locally at all. So I'm kind of interested in hearing from you if there are any thoughts that anyone has. Yes? No? Gwen?
Yeah. Interestingly enough, I've had a conversation this morning with a colleague from a credit union. I'm a volunteer at a local credit union as well. And one of the conversations we were having is how we can support families. And at the moment, one of the things we're looking at are loans for school uniforms. But it's that kind of initiative that I think we need to be looking at as well locally, is how we can partner up with organisations that are doing this sort of proactive work around addressing cheaper loans, encouraging people to save. And then in Warrington as well, the council have recently started the Poverty Commission as well, which unfortunately I've not been able to get to yet. It just clashes with everything else. So I think this is being run on similar lines to the one that was set up in Cheshire, with the, oh gosh, the full title escapes me, the Poverty Truth Commission, I think is the full title. So it'll be interesting to see how those things marry up to this task force and how they link in together.
Matt, I think your audio's gone.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so my fancy microphone that Yvonne told me I had has run out of batteries, so I put that on charge. So my audio might not be quite as good now.
Just sit super close to your computer, you'll be fine.
I mean, obviously, lots of the conversations that we get invited to, and the thinking that's going on is related to the child poverty and lack of income for families. That's like the framing for so much of these kind of conversations. And my working assumption is, and from the data that we have, is that poverty and lack of income is an increasingly kind of big part of the work of Home Starts. And I just want to check that that's right. Well, I've got some of you in the room that I'm not kind of completely wrong with that, but like that feels like a good start, and the fact that impacts then on kind of the phrase that all the rest of the support. Like, it's hard to kind of talk about other support for families while you have the kind of poverty and lack of income that just overwhelms everything else. Is that like a fair assumption that I make from those of you who are kind of involved in actually working with families, or am I wrong?
I think, oh, sorry, Bridget, just certainly from Manchester's perspective, it's a no-brainer, of course. I would probably, I'm making some assumptions, I've not looked at the most recent data, but 90% plus of the families we're supporting will be coming into that bracket of living in poverty. So absolutely it is the case, but that's not going to be the case across the network. But I think collectively, the assumption you're making is an absolute correct one. And so I think there is a national response there. There's got to be a national response. And I just wonder whether, does the NDR capture the data we need for you to be able to kind of make a really strong response, or do you need more intel from the network around that? And is that data driven? Is it more anecdotal in terms of the stories from families? So there's some questions there really, but you're absolutely right. I mean, whether it's poverty or whether it's some of those wider environmental factors around housing in particular, which of course is linked to poverty, the real barriers in terms of the rest of the support being meaningful and impactful for families. So we've got to have a response, definitely.
And interesting on NDR, looking for everything. Sure, you all know is incredibly close. The NDR is opened up for this year, and it's very well. Obviously, one of the questions in there is with issues on referral. We've tweaked that so we can get a bit kind of clear data. But I've always thought that actually the numbers of people that have got what we call debt and finance and housing are surprisingly quite low in kind of what I would expect. But so it would be interesting to see whether that is much higher this year or not, or whether we need to ask a different question. That get kind of caught that families facing kind of struggles with income aren't actually kind of captured in that question. I think that might be tricky, but we'll have to see. Eliza, no, yeah. Hold on a second. Someone put their hand up first. Bridget, put your hand up.
It was Bridget first.
You put your hand up, and then I'll come to people who.
Yeah.
Hi, I'd agree with Shelley. I think where we are in West Sussex is normally considered to be a reasonably affluent area, but we have these areas of poverty for children, most definitely, and quite some shocking figures for an area, as I say, that's considered to be affluent. We are setting up some meetings with our local MPs, and actually, again, Shelley, the letters that you talked about would be really helpful there, so that we can have the same message going out to all the MPs that we see and the groups that they come to visit. So that's just what I wanted to say.
Right. You're from Arran, right? Arran,
Worthing and Ada, yeah, right on the south coast.
Yeah, no, well, that's answered my first question, was just how do you pronounce Ada, because I've been here for 10 years now. But I also know that you used the End Child Poverty Coalition's local poverty stats last year to do some kind of complex.
Yes.
Really pleased to see that. You might see that this year's data has been released this last week. If you want to do that again, but that's now.
I don't know if it's the same for everybody else, but I'm only catching every other word.
Yeah, your audio's a little tricky. I did turn on captions. That's helped me slightly. Have you got a headset, Matt? On Thursday, we've got our all staff meeting, and I'm going to bring in one of the microphones that I use, so that Matt's always got a microphone that hasn't got to rely on battery.
I think what Matt was saying is that we put out a press release using some of the poverty stats, and actually that was really quite powerful. And we've had now a meeting with the High Sheriff and the Lord Lieutenant and various people who've read those stats and have been quite shocked by them. I think people that should know already, but as I say, what we want to do is to get our message clear. So looking at what National are putting out so that we can replicate that when we speak to our local MPs.
If you've not, thanks, Shelley. If you've not seen those, the End Child Poverty Coalition release each year the data for local authority and constituency levels of the level of child poverty in that area. So if you want to talk to your MP about that, or it's got the levels of child poverty in your in your area, so you can really target that communication. So Shelley's had to go. So Nikki, so Eliza first, then Nikki.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to, like, on the NDR and the stats, and I think there's something that, in not necessarily just looking at the data you're getting through to say this is the proportion of the network whose children are living in child poverty, but I think you want to be looking at what we know is the families most at risk of experiencing child poverty are families with a child under one in the home, families who are from ethnic minority backgrounds, families with children who are disabled or disabled family member, because that's going to be a much stronger argument when we're saying, well, if families with a child under one are at most at risk of child poverty, that's a really broad proportion of the network. And I think that's a much stronger argument to be looking at that rather than just the data that's coming through, because what we know about child poverty, it's not just the families in poverty, it's the families at risk or who are on that kind of cusp of in work poverty and maybe aren't showing up on the stats, but life is super difficult for them. And so I think that there's a kind of broader case to be made about what Home Start does is not just respond to crisis, but we're working in a preventative way to make sure families aren't falling into crisis. And this is the cohort of families that we're supporting who sit in that category. And that data should be much more robust from the network in terms of ages of children that people are supporting, that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. I think we're quite excited about the NDR this year. We've got the work that Lindsay did last year, especially in visualization data and analysis. We did a lot more last year, and I think we've got some good plans for this year. Nikki.
Yeah, I'm just agreeing really with everything obviously Eliza was saying, and was it Shelley was saying prior to that. I think what you're saying there, Eliza, about us kind of you know, focusing on children under 1 is really important. There's a lot of other organisations who are doing, you know, under 5, but we are the specialists in the kind of under 1. So that is our USP really. And I think as you know, as time's going on, there's, you know, in Glasgow we are finding many people unfortunately jumping on the bandwagon, in terms of the bigger organisations, the likes of Aberlour, etc., who weren't specialists in the earliest years, and they're now potentially focusing on that because they potentially see that's maybe where going forward the government might be putting funds in. I was going to say I was just double checking his title actually. So Mike Burns, who was the Assistant Chief Officer for Glasgow, and he's now been seconded, and he's the Programme Director for Child Poverty and Prevention for Greater Glasgow and Clyde. And we were desperate to get him out, and we've harangued him, and we managed to get him out to our early years hub that we're in the midst of developing at the moment. And he was really impressed, and I guess wanted to hear the kind of journey, you know, our journey of perinatal support, when it started and how it's developed over the years. And he was really keen to kind of take the story of a community midwifery and third sector and community midwifery coming together. So, I mean, I know it's the kind of one-stop shop, but his intention, he said he had a meeting with John Swinney, I think this week, and certainly was citing the hub and the difference that was making. So I think it's just that we're all banging the same drum, and it's about getting people to listen, and at the highest level.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say no pressure, Liza, but I could think of a really grand title to give you for when you stride into Scottish Government. But yeah.
Yeah, that's helpful. Okay, so I think I'm not surprised that what I've heard about kind of child poverty, but I'm kind of pleased to know that we're on the right track with it. We could obviously continue. It's one of the kind of big priorities. I think when we set out the priorities for focus, child poverty was on there. I'm just glad that it probably seems it's still a relevant thing for us. And then, but almost linked to that, but where I find it slightly harder to work out where or whether we can at a national level have a kind of point of entry is around changes to kind of disability benefit. And because we're not, I'm certainly not, but anyone on the team here who is an expert in the kind of benefit system, especially disability benefit. And I was just wondering whether helping families navigate that system is something that happens locally, or is it something that you kind of, is that kind of part of your work with families? Is it something that we can show as a kind of maybe some example, like on the ground kind of case studies of how you have to support families through a really complex system and one that might be getting harder to access actually is something that we could do? And that might be the kind of point of entry for us.
Can I say, Matt, I think the storytelling methodology that we've used in Oxfordshire and is being used increasingly across Home Start is one of the most powerful tools.
Yeah.
And I know that when we've had our AGMs and have had families willing to stand up and share their experiences, that beats almost any contribution from data, because actually it's the lived experience and their journey.
Matt, sorry, just because I can't hear you that clearly.
Yeah,
but were you saying, no, it's okay. I know Yvonne will sort you out. Were you saying, talking about the families that we're supporting with disabilities, were you inferring that, is that something that staff do, is that they're helping families with young children with disabilities, helping them navigate through the benefit system? Is that your question?
Essentially, yeah. I mean, it's that because I don't know if people can hear me a bit better now. I've just been able to
That's better.
charge this up a little bit. Yeah. Essentially, are you doing work, any of you, that is helping families who are that access disability benefits to navigate that system to kind of help them and maximize their income?
Yeah.
Or kind of supporting them, and our families that you're working with worried that they're going to be receiving less, so they kind of, is that becoming a factor? Is this an area where we could say, what can I add and what can we add to this kind of debate? It might be actually just having some examples from you locally about how this is a focus of your work or how it's impacting families. I'm just trying to get a picture of that.
I mean, I can't speak on other people's behalf. I think it's an area that we do work on. I don't think it's our specialist area. So I think there's an element of we are advocating on behalf and maybe signposting sometimes to more specialist people in that field, because the whole thing around finance and benefit is complex, and I think we could potentially do families a disservice if we don't have the most relevant and up-to-date information.
Yeah, okay, it's interesting. Anyone else have any kind of thoughts on this?
Yeah, I just want to agree with Nikki. Having worked for a charity that did give disability support and benefit support, I know how complicated it can be, and if you give the wrong advice, how bad that can be. So I definitely think the signposting is something that we're very good at doing from Home Start, and it's not just around disability and benefits, it's around all the work that we do. There are specialists in all the different areas, and I think what we do is we look at what our families want and need and see who's the best person to support them beyond ourselves. I know in Warrington we've got an excellent charity called Warrington Disability Partnership, they run a Disability Awareness Day, which is an internationally recognised awareness day now, and they're the kind of people that we would go to get that support around information on disability, and also CABs, although their funding is drastically affected.
Yeah.
So I do think you need to tap into that specialist support for this kind of thing.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I was going to say is I think it is interesting for us to think about this not from like an operational perspective of what do we do to support families to get the right benefits payment. But I think the question is if a Labour government is going to radically change what benefits disabled parents or disabled people, of which parents are in that group, are going to be able to access, how is that going to further drive families into poverty or affect their, and so and I think this is an interesting question, Matt, about how we find people outside of Home Start that we can align ourselves with that are doing, say, work around this to which we can add our voice, because, I don't think there'll be many Home Starts across the country that are doing specific work with disabled adults. Or there'll be people that are working in partnership with CABs, for example. But I think it's more about, this is a cohort of families, like the housing, like the housing call of how do we align ourselves with people that are doing work at a policy level on this? Because if the suggested benefit changes happen, it is going to impact a proportion of families that we're supporting. 10% of the families at Home Start Edinburgh are disabled parents. So, and I think that's probably more. And I guess from that perspective, it'd be interesting from this forum about maybe how do we kind of take a step back and say these are the agenda things that we're going to focus on, and where can we link with external organizations that we could work in partnership with to lend our voice, because they'll have expertise in areas that we don't. So is there, for example, a national disability campaigning organization that we could work with to do something specific on this, or to provide some case studies of disabled parents, that kind of thing?
I think that's right. It might be, we're now at time, but it might be something for us to for me to take away and think about, because obviously we have really kind of small, kind of limited kind of capacity to do any of this work, and we have to kind of prioritize. It's where the priority of focus is, and where we can do so. Some coalitions or some kind of organizations we can part with and do lots of work with. Some it'll have to be kind of slightly kind of less. And what can we add to this this area kind of particularly? Okay, that's really helpful. That's really helpful starting point, I think. But I'll take that back and think about it. So we are at 3 o'clock. So thank you everybody for coming and today and sharing your thoughts. I mean, this is going to go onto At Home as a recording.
It will, yeah.
I will share the notes and any actions that I've got as well. And I want to kind of keep doing these every quarter as long as they're useful for people. I mean, I find it very helpful. I want to make sure, but it's got to be helpful for people. I'd like more people to come, but it's got to be useful. But I've also heard Eliza and Nikki about how actually we need to make sure that it's, that whether we need to have specific ones for different nations, that's a potential option, but also whether we can have, I don't want it to be can be completely siloed, because I think there are kind of things especially from Scotland, that are useful to hear in England and shaping, especially around kind of language and kind of framing of things. I don't want to completely cut those off. So how do we make sure that it's not completely siloed in how we work? But let's take that away and talk. Eliza, perhaps we can talk about that as something in our session. Thank you very much, everybody, and I will speak to you all soon. Thanks.